Thanks for being in our live today, and we're really excited for the topic we're going to talk about remote work. So let's before we start, let's tell everybody a little bit about yourself and what you do with Flik.
Sure. Yeah, I am Michelle Kwok. I am the co-founder and CEO of Flik, and we are a platform and community hub that connects female founders and leaders with students from all across the world through meaningful remote apprenticeships.
Mm-hmm.
So female founders who are typically so under-resourced are able to get helping hands on their businesses, and students from around the world, female students are able to gain career relevant experience, skills training, and mentorship under established female leaders. And we're really looking to elevate entrepreneurial women around the world.
Amazing. Yeah. I think I saw Michelle in a Slack channel that is one of those female communities, and I was like, oh, this looks so cool. So I reached out, and then I'm so happy that we are here today. So let's start with the future of remote work, because we know that since the pandemic, the whole working dynamic has changed drastically. So let's see what's your point of view, and then what does it has to do with how you started Flik.
Yeah, I definitely think that remote work is the future, and it is a huge reason why we were able to be successful when we launched Flik. Um, I think the issue with the previous job market was that everybody was looking for only talent geographically. Like they were very limited to whoever was within their city boundaries or within at least within an hour of where they were, 2 hours of where they were. And now we're able to connect people from across the world, and talent really has no boundaries and no limits. And those who were underrepresented in the past are able to have access to amazing job opportunities or apprenticeship opportunities with us. So, for example, we have a venture-backed founder who is in San Francisco, and she's building this amazing tech company there. She's been looking for talent for a really long time, but she wasn't able to find somebody in particular who really resonated with her mission. And she was actually able to onboard 2 apprentices from Sri Lanka that she said she otherwise would have never met and would have never considered. But through our platform, she was able to take them on, and she was like, wow, these are the first people who are really resonating with my mission and totally understanding what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And this is really going to be, the future of work, is that people are going to understand that perfect fits, like perfect culture fits that really transcends time zones, that transcends geographical boundaries. You're able to hire from anywhere and everywhere, and that shouldn't be a problem anymore.
Yes, I totally agree. And then actually, I am happily to see that a lot of the bigger companies, they are doing that as well. They're starting to giving options for employees to just work remotely, and then so that the employees could cut the time of commuting, and then also a lot of the area where the offices are have higher rent and higher living costs. So I think that having this remote work going on in whatever industries it is, I think it's a great thing. But a lot of times we also see some difficulties because it all happens on a sudden. So a lot of people found it difficult to adapt to the remote work. Employers may feel like, I don't know what my employees are doing, the teamwork, how to communicate, all of those things. How should we adapt to it?
Yeah, I definitely think that there's going to be a shift towards being able to adapt to that kind of team culture. It is difficult when you're not able to see people in person, but there's so many different things that you can do. So, for example, a lot of teams have different Slack channels that beyond just the corporate, general speak where you're talking about work all the time, you also have a team culture channel within your Slack group, or you're able to share mini wins about your own days in your Slack group. So I think a lot of team cultures will have to shift more to a startup kind of culture and vibe where people are able to bridge both being professional and also sharing about their personal lives so that they can resonate and connect with other people without being face to face in an office situation. Other things, for example, things that we're going to implement are just having virtual cocktail parties. So we have a partner. It's yeah, we have a partner called Run the World, and on Run the World, you're able to have cocktail parties. So you can throw everybody into a cocktail party situation, and every 5 minutes they'll get matched up to somebody else so that they're speaking to somebody like this. Even if you have a huge team, then there's possibility that the CEO is going to be able to chat with an intern on this cocktail party because everybody is on the same plane. Everybody gets mixed together and is able to meet each other. So I think there's going to be a lot more virtual platforms that are going to come to light that are going to help us have a little bit more connection and maybe even help break barriers between hierarchies, and it'll become more of a flat hierarchy. So everybody wants to be involved in team culture. Everybody wants to get to know each other and find a way to connect in a real way.
Yeah, I agree. The technology, thanks to the technology that we are having, is that we have so many different platforms. Actually, a lot of new ones coming up that has been coming up this year. We use Slack too. I feel like it's so useful. We use it for literally everything. And but for companies, let's say if you're hiring, how do you adapt to it? Because a lot of time you don't actually see the candidates in person. So how do companies adapt to this as a lot of their candidates now have to work remotely or even doing a virtual interview instead of in person?
I honestly think that having in-person interviews presents a lot of barriers to candidates. And like, what is the reasoning behind having to see this candidate in person versus virtually? Because at the end of the day, you're still going to ask the same questions. You still see their facial expressions. You still get to see how they interact with you as a person. And if you want to bring other people in, you can see how they interact with other people as well. So I don't know what the downside really is to employers who are hiring. I actually think that it's better and it's more accessible to candidates, and it's better for employers because they're going to be able to increase their diversity hiring. So they're going to be able to hire more diversity because they are doing these virtual interviews. So for example, one of our partners, Chronically Capable, they work with chronically ill and disabled job seekers. And during the pandemic, since everything has gone virtual, it's so much more accessible for those people who suffer from disabilities to be able to go into a job interview and get the job, rather than having to transport and get somewhere. And there's always a stigma, and they feel like there's a stigma around who they are when people see them in person. Whereas now it's so much more accessible for them just to have this virtual job interview. And it's the same thing. You know, you're going to ask me the same questions. We're going to go through the same challenges. Maybe there will be a technical issue, but at the end of the day, you're still talking to the same person and you're able to see how I interact with others. So I don't think that employers should see it as a disadvantage.
Yeah, I agree. As now you said that, it feels like, oh, it's true, it's so different. I think it's a lot of time is the mindset that we've been having for so long, working in offices, interviewing people in person. We didn't realize that it's not exactly something that's really needed to be face to face, physically. So how the pandemic has affected, let's say, female founders, because Flik, I know that is specifically for it's a female laboratory of innovative knowledge, right? So how does the pandemic has affected female founders and students in particular?
I think the pandemic is widely known that the pandemic has disproportionately impacted female founders. Female founders last year, according to PitchBook, they raised only 2.8% of the VC money that went to all startups that raised venture money last year, right? So with female founders trying to make strides in raising money, for example, that's going to be taken down 10 notches, if not more, because of the pandemic, because investors are looking for lower valuations, because investors are more risk averse and are looking for people that they trust, which end up being people who look like them, who have the same background as them.
Mm-hmm.
So female founders are definitely on a venture side going to be hit quite hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I think something like in the past 3 months, that has been the worst raising that for female founders that has been seen in the last 10 years. So
Mm-hmm.
it's pretty clear that way. And also, female founders are really known to be already under resourced.
Mm-hmm.
And so, with the pandemic hitting and everybody just going back into their bunkers and being like, oh my gosh, how can I fix this for myself? And nonprofit organizations are struggling, and organizations that otherwise would be supporting female founder are also struggling and they don't have the funding.
Mm-hmm.
So the female founders aren't even getting the baseline resources that they otherwise would have pre-pandemic. So I think female founders it's very clear that female founders are disproportionately negatively impacted by the pandemic. And then with female students, so many of them, exactly the same type of logic. If they're looking to break into male-dominated industries, all of these industries that were previously hiring are having a freeze on hiring. And if they are hiring, it's usually through networks, and it's usually through people who know people, or people who look exactly like them and resonate with them, so we're kind of shifting back to the idea of the old boys club, where the classic top tier people are only going to be hiring the classic top tier people and their kids. And so I think female students are definitely going to be facing a disadvantage, which is why it's imperative that we do give female students a place for them to have some sort of experience and to get their foot in the door and start rising, especially in a time like this.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. This actually reminds me of one of the questions that I've heard of one of my younger friends who just graduated. Is that she was struggling in, should I start looking for a remote work first, which is so much more challenging right now, instead of maybe going directly to trying to find her own business right away. So what would be your suggestion? I know that with Flik, you have you provides resources, you provides lots of the connections, and also helping them to answer those questions. What's your point of view regarding this question?
I think that now more than ever, more companies are much more open to the idea of remote work. So all of the opportunities aren't as geographically based anymore. Maybe at the beginning of the pandemic, it was going to be very difficult to find remote work that fits, but I think a lot of that has changed. Of course, the job market is not bumping right now, so
Yeah.
it might be difficult, but finding remote opportunities is something that I definitely suggest and support,
Mm-hmm.
especially for those. For example, there are accelerators around Canada that used to be very geographically based, and you would have to be located in that place in order to do the accelerator to get resources as a young founder. But now all of those are going virtual. So now you have
Mm-hmm.
access to resources that you never would have before. So not only with job opportunities, but there's so many programs that are going virtual. There's so many accelerators and courses and stuff like Flik, where you have access to all these resources that otherwise would have been geographically based pre-pandemic. So why not take advantage of them? I definitely would suggest going to look for remote resources and programs.
Yeah, I totally agree. And then actually, breaking the limits of time zone and different physical locations is definitely really helpful. Especially as you've mentioned before, is that you always have to look at talents that's within an hour driving. We're in California, South California, so it's like so much driving wherever we go. So this is definitely really helpful for, at least for people who live in California, but I believe for other places as well. So in these situations that we've mentioned, in particular, where we have less funding and less resources, what resources women need to excel in this kind of challenging situations?
So we actually just we're actually releasing a report on this on Monday. We just launched one of the biggest surveys around female founders this year with over 289 female founder respondents from around the world. And just for a sneak peek of the report that we're releasing on Monday morning, it's clear that female founders need more dedicated funding in order to reach equity. And also what was really interesting was the next top thing that we need to reach equity in the space of entrepreneurship is to give earlier exposure to young women in entrepreneurship. I think those two things are very, very key. And you can also take that early exposure to young women into other industries, like male-dominated industries, like tech or finance, AI, those types of industries as well, is that in order to reach equity in the space, women need to have access to role models and mentors and experiences in these industries where they're typically not found, because if they aren't introduced to them earlier, why are they going to choose them in the future? And that was so true for me. I was very, very lucky when I was growing up. I didn't have access to any of this entrepreneurship stuff. My family never told me that this was a choice, and they actually probably didn't want me to do it. I mean, I know they didn't want me to do this, but I was lucky in that while I was in university, I was exposed to entrepreneurship and met a lot of people through LinkedIn and other events that were like, you kind of seem like an entrepreneur. You're kind of jack of all trades. You're good at a lot of different things. Maybe you want to try out this thing, and you seem to want to create a lot of impact. Did you know that entrepreneurship is a way where you can create whatever impact you want using whatever medium you want, and it's basically you creating your dream job? And I was like, that's awesome. But if I had never learned that, from an earlier age, and that's not even that early to be in university and learn it, I never would have chosen this path now. I definitely grew up risk averse, and so I know I would have never chosen this path. But imagine if I had learned this when I was in elementary school, or if I were in high school and I had access to innovation challenges and was shown social impact entrepreneurs and got to meet them and learn their stories and why they did what they did. That could have been a huge game changer.
Yeah, totally. And then you were also mentioning your networking in different groups. That was in the school, but now I see a lot of the networking events, and actually a lot of the communities that I've been following, they change all of their events into virtual events now. What do you feel about like the difference between remote like networking in those cocktail hours that's only online than in person? Do you feel like it's it's a little barrier if we're not actually seeing them?
Oh, I actually don't think it's a barrier. So for me, I didn't attend a lot of in-person networking events pre-pandemic, because I was a medical science student prior to all of this. So I didn't really have access to in-person networking events. I did most of my networking online. And I realized that, my accessibility to people was so much higher because I only looked for people online. I could reach out to people on LinkedIn. So that's why I mentioned the LinkedIn thing, was because I would reach out to people on LinkedIn. I would add a note to it, just be like, I love your work in X, and I want to chat to you about Y. Do you mind if we get on like a 15-minute phone chat type of thing? And that gave me access to people in Portland, in New York, the entire time I was in London, Ontario, and you probably don't even know where that is, and I probably wouldn't have been able to meet anyone there. But because I had no access to in-person networking events, I looked online first. And that's where I realized that there are less barriers to online networking than in-person networking, because in-person networking, there's probably 3 people in the room that everybody wants to meet. And so they're not going to remember you, because you're going to go up to them and you're going to have your 2 minutes to give your pitch about yourself, but so is everybody else. But virtually, they're looking at your message separately. There's no other event around it. They're looking at your message. They either answer you or you don't. And if they answer you, then your name is on the message thing the entire time. So if they answer you, you answer back, they remember your name. So I don't think that there's a barrier in terms of virtual networking. It's just how you look at it and how you approach it.
I actually love that you how you approach people and that you actually look for networking with people online, and that is actually very true for me. Before pandemic, I actually attend a lot of in-person networking events, and then I do feel that it will be more helpful if we connect someone online where people can already see your name, they can already look at your website or look at your portfolio or your profile, if it's on LinkedIn. So it's actually really true. And also that people could choose to not respond you, or if they don't, but still it is there where they can open it anytime they want to, or they can respond whenever they want to. But if they miss you in the event, they probably don't have the chance to come back at you. So I think it's great. I think it's a really good advice, and I think it's also encouraging people to be more active online and trying to chat with people, message people. A lot of people, they will be worried if I don't get a response or anything. And then it's kind of doesn't matter, because you can reach out to 100 people at the same time, and then you can get at least 5 of them or one of them respond back to them. So I totally agree, and thanks for the great advice, Michelle. I'm really happy to chat with you today, and I think that we've got a lot of really helpful tips. And after this, I will have the video upload to IGTV, and then tag you, and then I'll list out your website, so whoever wants a resource and connect with Michelle and Flik, and feel free to come back. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, and it was a great conversation. I really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much. You have a good one. Bye, everybody in the room. Thank you so
You
much for
too.
watching.
Bye.